every assessment will be backed by PYQ, microthemes, will be backed by X factor notes, will be backed by this kind of smash architecture, which I just showed you: theme, demand, directive, dimension, argument, and example. Take a screenshot of this. This is how you need to prepare. And this pattern, once you understand, trust me, it recurs every time you write an answer. No FOMO, but you are always geared in to ensure that your attempts are progressively getting better. This is what separates a ranker answer from a beginner answer. On current affairs, we have Samachar Manthan on a weekly level, but I also will be taking burning issue themes with you. If this makes sense, pause everything, call us at this number. We're starting a batch both for 26 and 27 students this October.
I started my full-fledged preparation after I joined the Ultimate Assessment Program at Civilsdaily.
Civilsdaily.
There is a 12-month strategy which I have done on Civilsdaily platform only.
I reached out to the Civilsdaily team.
Civilsdaily.
Current affairs में Civilsdaily.
Civilsdaily.
A mentorship program of Civilsdaily, and that did help me a lot.
Hi everyone. This video is supposed to be a wake-up call for all of you who are preparing for 2026 and a call to start preparation in the right manner for those who are looking for the 27 attempt. Okay, I'm taking two themes. One is agriculture, another is the demographic dividend, which are very simple. Almost most of you would have written answers on this or seen or read answers on this, and it keeps recurring on and off every year. And that is why it's very important, and that's why it's the right themes to tell you the difference between a beginner and a ranker level answer. Because what happens is that when you compare your answer or your thought process to an actual ranker, Harneet Sudan, who was one of our students, you will get a critical bird's eye view of where the preparation gaps stand as of now, as of this month in October. And people preparing for 26 attempt, you have the next 3 months to patch up all those gaps. Okay, the question is simple. Indian agriculture requires a transition in cropping patterns to secure sustainable farm production and enhance farmer incomes. In this context, discuss the changes required and highlight the measures taken by government. Now, we tell our students that whenever such a question comes, try to reframe the question in your own words. Try to think and simplify it so that you can begin to think about an answer. And the way to simplify it is this. Something happened because of Green Revolution and we benefited a lot from it, and agriculture has been carrying more or less in the same manner. What has now happened that we can't continue in the same way? Ecological balance is lost, economic prosperity of farmers is going down. Why is this such a clarion call? That is the context of the question. Okay. Now, this is part of the static syllabus, more or less. Okay, there will be some news here and there on the current affairs, but they'll all point back to a theme which has been recurring in the news for years and decades now. So, most of you would have some points, and those points would look like this. So, once you understand that the directive here is to discuss, anyone who has done any bit of answer writing for mains would know that you have to identify explicit and implicit themes and then figure out the demand. So that thing is locked. There are two demands, that there are some changes required to make sure that this is sustainable. Why? You have to think. And you have to figure out where, what, and why are those changes required. And then you have to talk about the government measures and the policies and schemes till date, commensurate to those changes which are required. So the explicit theme is pretty simple. It's that the cropping patterns which we've been following are no more yielding the sustainability, and these are the two demands. But a ranker would take a step back and actually go to the heart of the question and understand the core tension here. The core tension is that ecological necessity and economic compulsion are now at loggerheads with each other. Okay, this is one of the perennial themes of Indian agriculture, on which you'll find op-eds coming almost every 2 weeks a month, a new policy measure continuing with the past, changing the things, reassessing the thing, new data coming to the fore, and that's precisely what UPSC wants to be knowing from you. Now, when you introduce such a question, and I'll take you to the topper and the beginner level answer, there are two ways to introducing it, right? One is, if you've identified the theme, you jump right to it. Another is, if you haven't identified the theme, if you're not very sure about the demand of the question, you will kind of try to circuit around and say something which makes sense. You might end up defining what cropping patterns look like, which is not the demand or the theme of this question. Okay, that's understood. And then you might mention some things, the reasons of climate change, socioeconomic causes, urbanization, good points nonetheless, but you will not have a structure to present it in a way. Contrast with that, look at what Harneet did. Very quickly, he summarized in a simple pie chart about the existing monoculture, rice wheat dominated cropping pattern, which is the case of India. Okay. And then he drew a simple diagram of the issues with this cropping pattern, wherein he input the data. This data point that water use for rice and sugarcane is exorbitantly inefficient, right? You can quote up data from Punjab and Maharashtra region, and you can put your point in a simple line, rather without wasting a lot of words, right? And that just works right in. Rather than doing that, the beginner goes on and keeps defining basic things, missing the theme and demand. But that's not it. That's just the beginning of an answer which goes wrong. The funda that you need to understand is that this question harps back to the gains which we shaped via the Green Revolution and why they are no more validated now, and what we need to do to make our cropping pattern more climate resistant, more water sensible, and value rich. That's the whole big ambit which we have to cover in this question. Dimensions. So we teach by the DAE approach. We talk about the dimension, argument, and example approach. And the key dimension among many which all of you should take, the key 4 dimensions are ecological sustainability, farmers' income and their value diversification, policy and institutional distortion, where you have to talk about the existing compounding issues, with the decades of what we've been doing, which still percolate down, and then markets, behavior, and demand creation. Mota, in your static understanding, these are the points that you would have read, or these are the headers under which you would have read the points, put in your one-pager notes, added the data, and now is the time when you collect all that, put it into 150 words for a 10-marker question. This is a mature attempt. And try to understand line by line what it took for a ranker to get to this point. We're in October right now. This topic is not dependent on your current affairs knowledge from now till even prelims or even mains. This topic and the answer is only dependent upon how well you're able to structure the points in a priority manner. Okay, structure things in a hierarchical manner. Now we saw that the introduction was done to set the context. This is where the gains, or this is where the trail from the Green Revolution lies. Okay, he didn't mention Green Revolution, but he basically said that this cropping pattern reflects and does not go well with sustainable farm income, farm produce, and climate change issues wo niche likhta hai, but more or less he's given the context right. Then this is an important table. Why the issues with this cropping patterns are both unsustainable and low income, both unsustainable ecologically and economically. Gives the full point and then divides the body into 2 parts. One is where he talks about the changes required. Now, remember the dimensions which we wrote in the last slide. Those are the directives for you guys. Ecological sustainability is missing. Farmer incomes are going down because there are some other value diversification crops which we are not getting to in mass at scale. Policy and institutional distortions will take time to get course corrected, but government is probably taking measures there. And then markets and behavior and demand creation also needs to be taken care of. Harneet takes the approach wherein he quickly lists down the points first and then talks about the government steps separately. Okay. What you can also do is build dimension blocks, put out your argument, give the example where things are going wrong, and then give the government correction measures. So all these individual points that millets are being promoted, this would come in the growth segment, that markets and behavior and growth corrections have to be done. Points where we are talking about sustainable agriculture, Sinchai Yojana, will have to come with restoring the ecological balances. Points where we're talking about PM Asha scheme and including oil seeds pulses, we'll be talking about that majority of MSP collection, majority of MSP is still geared towards rice and wheat, close to 80%. So if you really want to incentivize farmers to switch You will have to make sure that that is promoted in the PM Asha scheme. Understand that if you have your static theory done right till now, you will inevitably have these data points which you cannot miss, and they will stand out because they will give the right context. They will give the imminent issues. These are the stats which all of you should know. And then you can distribute your challenges and government steps either separately or together in different paragraphs. That would close this question for you completely. But if you do not think like this, if this is not how your one-pager notes are made, or if this is not how you break down the question into theme, demand, explicit demand, implicit demand, and then dimension, if you don't have a habit of this, okay, then you will write the answer, but your answer will lack structure. So you will have points, and mains exam and mains answer writing is no more about points alone. It's about presenting them in a structure which puts the argument up front and then hierarchically puts the point down so that you reach a conclusion which is well earned. This is what separates a ranker answer from a beginner answer. Okay. If you want to summarize this point for yourself and do a self-assessment as we are sitting in October, I would suggest take a screenshot of this table and try to see that, those half and 1 mark changes between a beginner to a ranker level answer come because of their attention to detail at this level. Okay. Introduction, we already showed that introduction, if you're not thinking it clearly, if you do not have the data recall, and those are like pretty familiar data, then you will end up defining something. And we'll see the same thing recurring in another question that we'll take before I get into the thick of what to do now if you find yourself on this side of the table. But if you think like a beginner, you will end up defining the cropping pattern. Okay? Then you'll end up taking this whole thing as a definitional base, basically as just a point listing. So the DAE approach will go for a toss, right? And because the DAE approach will go for a toss, this will be done in a haphazard manner. This will be done in a haphazard manner. This will not find its validity here. And you will end up listing some points which you would recollect from your memory, which would be just a listing of points. So if you can see, the beginner does list some interesting points. He talks about climate change, but then he ends up going into examples rather than structuring the whole problem. Okay. He talks about some interesting things. Hyderabad farmers going for aquaponics, which is diversification because of urbanization. But they're not coming in a DAE approach. They're not coming in an argument, example, and government steps together. Okay. Then you have millets being mentioned here, integrating millets as nutri-cereals. But they're not coming as a part of a policy structure. They're not coming as a part of a subheading which says that if you really want to make a behavioral change happen, you have to make the market viability of that crop which you're trying to promote. Okay, and these are simple points. Look at Harneet's answer. These are static, more or less very static pointers, just put in a structured way, which changes the question's answer from 20 to 50. Okay, the same question will fetch maybe 3 marks here. It will fetch 6 here. Continue to understand what are the interesting things, right? If you look at the topper's approach, you would link cropping patterns with climate change, you will directly nail the question here, right? The duality, sustainability of both ecology and sustainability and sustenance of farmers' income. Then you will cover those, these are the biases. These are the biases which you cover because of the dimensions. Ecological one comes here, serial bias comes here, and regional imbalances. Harneet didn't talk about regional imbalance, but that's another point which you could have mentioned. Adds pie chart, maps. Then you have a structured approach, which is what we call the DAE framework. Take a screenshot of this. This is how you need to prepare. And this pattern, once you understand, trust me, it recurs every time you write an answer. This is the nuance and the micro level detail with which you need to attempt the questions right now when you're doing your PYQ analysis. Okay, let's take one more so that the point is well driven in. This is the question about demographic dividend. And broadly speaking, this question says that the demographic dividend of a country, if it's not harnessed, it would become demographic burden. If the policies and interventions are not put in place, wherein you can solve for both things, lack of jobs and lack of employability or job readiness, then the demographic burden and then the demographic dividend that you're celebrating today will become demographic burden. And we have seen this happen in countries worldwide. We talk about different countries which were not able to crack this puzzle and they lost their demographic dividend. That's the problem, simple problem, which this question is asking you to answer in 150 words for a 10 marker. Now, the core understanding of this issue is that, do you understand that while you answer this question, your dimensions should hit at these things? That there is a temporary nature of demographic advantage, which I just mentioned, and that window before it closes, we have to capture it. Okay. Are there any reports or examples of other countries which mention and push this point? If there are reports, if there is a data, please mention that up. The employment elasticity of growth in India. We know that GDP rises, but the employment statistics would come down, right? We would see this dichotomy. If you have the economics knowledge to that depth, if your GS is prepared to that level, that's another dimension that you can enter in here. The structural mismatch between education and employability. This is where you talk about policy changes, which the government probably has effectuated now, and it will take some time to get implemented or to show the results. And then the policy coordination between education, industry, and skilling. So the core understanding, this is what should come to your mind if you prepared your static better, because this is a perennial topic. And when that comes to mind, just like how Harneet answered this question, you will know that this is the core tension which will prevail in this answer. On one side, you will have causes of unemployability. On one side, you will have causes of unemployment. India has demographic dividend window till mid 2050s, and the issue of youth employment 28%. This is the data which sets the context right. When it sets the context right, then you have nothing to worry, but just stack the issues together. You stack the context together, then you stack how both unemployment and unemployability are problems which go hand in hand. These tensions will go hand in hand, right? You have social tensions, you have poor economic growth, wastage of talent, promise of good quality life, but which is not going to be achieved. You can call upon articles from Constitution, you can call upon local bills, you can call upon events which have happened in the last year or so, put them, stack them all together, and kind of get a pestle approach to this tension, and that would naturally get you to the last part of this question, wherein you have to comment on the steps that are required, which government has taken. But you just have to comment. The directive of this question is to comment. You do not have to take a side. You have to put a balanced position, both sides. This would be a beginner answer. And if you read this closely, you will find that he has written a lot of points. He has quoted a lot of reports, but they lack a structure. And the reason why they lack a structure is because they lack a structure in this person's notes as well. That is the reason why one-pager notes towards the end of your preparation or as you mature in your preparation becomes very, very important. Okay. Again, take a screenshot of this. This would be like a ready reference table for you to understand that even though you have same data, same content, same kind of videos, and it's a static course to prepare with, why would your answers look drastically different? Which is what will create the actual difference in the marks of the mains. So this is what you need to arrest. Which brings me to the most important part, that as we stand here in October and we're preparing for, let's say, 2026 and 2027, we know that these three are non-negotiables, right? We've been hearing this for at least 2 years now. CD has been working on this for the last 3 years. For the last 1.5 years, we perfected this to the T. Complete your NCRT, make sure you have one-pager notes, your own one-pager notes. You can download topper notes from Telegram, but that won't serve you the purpose unless and until you've struggled through them by yourself. And the last and the most important thing is start your answer writing from week 1. Because in week 1, you are bound to write the beginner level answer. You are bound to write even a poorer answer than that. because week one, you're just flustered with facts. As you keep maturing through your answer writing, as you keep taking our suggestions or feedback from the mentors in the UAP or the SMASH program, you will inevitably adopt the grammar of UPSC answer writing, which would be theme and demand, implicit theme, explicit theme. Demand can only be figured out by dimensions. Dimensions have to be supplemented with arguments, examples. We will be drilling down this in your head like a broken record. And that's what's going to help. That is why it's going to make the momentum up and keep it at that level. Okay. Now, just to put things into perspective, okay, if this was very heavy for you, or if you feel that this is far off in the game for you, that this is something which mains will tell, and by that time, if you keep doing something, automatically it will fetch you to this point. Let me tell you, nothing is organic in UPSC. You have to have very conscious, deliberate efforts. Otherwise, you end up being falling a part of the statistics. So this year UPSC results, we had about 38 in-service officers making to top 100 again. And if you include people in-service, as in like people who got central services, and if you get state services and other services as well, that number goes very high. The number of students or aspirants who made it in their first attempt was abysmally low. And I have one more important statistics to tell you. This number is derived from UPSC 73rd annual report. This number is very compelling. Out of the 748 service allocated candidates, okay, not just recommended would be somewhere around 1000. Out of the allocated candidates, only close to 8% were the first attempt Janta. That's the actual bar of competition for you. Not that you can't clear it. Animesh cleared it in the first attempt. A lot of people do. But you need to understand the deliberate attempts and the deliberate efforts they make to make it happen would look like the answer writing transitions you've seen from the beginner to the ranker. UPSC is not just testing the basic, which almost everyone knows, which are the tangible things that you can measure. The unseen components are so important. 1 and 2 we know. Rote learning we know is not sufficient. Rote learning can only and will only give you data points to remember, which are important, but unless and until you understand the gravity of those data points, okay, unless and until Harneet or anyone else understand that this is the gravity of the data point, 28% unemployment for under 25 graduates, that's a huge number. And this he has derived from a report. Unless and until he understands that this data point is important, because of the severity of issue can only be highlighted with a data point, not just with rhetorics. Rote learning will not be helpful. So you need to understand rote learning has a place, but it's what they call in statistics, it's necessary but not sufficient. Okay. Relying on passive mental recall is always ineffective. Unless and until you write the answers, unless and until you attempt an answer like this, wherein you will end up having data points, but you don't know that if you've aligned them properly or not. Unless and until you understand this versus this, you will never know the gap that you have to bridge, right? So sitting in front of your laptop, listening to your video, if you're here till now, you might get a sense of, yes, this makes sense, and I'm only going to write like this. But just attempt a question, attempt 5 questions. That's what we give a challenge to our students in UAP. Samachar Manthan every week happens, we give them 5 questions to answer. Assess those 5 questions, and their mentor sits with them and then tells them, boss, here is where you lacked. Here is where you could not get the implicit theme. So you just got the explicit theme, you misunderstood the directive. If the directive was to critically examine, then in the same question, you also have to give your point of view. The directive here was just comment. Had it been critically analyzed or examined, then you will have to give your point of view. A balanced point of view, but you have to err on one side. You have to show the fallouts of government policies or the gaps which they are still supposed to bridge. Then this question might go for 250 words or 15 marker. But that's how you'll have to pace it. Ye cheez can only happen if you're very deliberate with your preparation style, right? So as you mature, as you go to the point number 3, where you understand the theme-based, term-based questions, you start constantly figuring out where you're lacking. This is like a hyper mode for aspirants now, especially after 2020 2024 attempts. Okay, 2026, 2027 is going to be the day for only those people who are always at it. And sometimes it gets tough to always be at it. You need a mentor, you need a good peer group to keep checking you on your low days, to keep getting you back on track, to keep telling you that do not fall for this, don't fall for this gap, don't get into a slumber, don't just give into your inertia, get back on track. Which is why UAP is the program for those people who either have no background in competitive exams, okay, and so you do not know that having no background in competition exam basically doesn't give you a perspective if you're preparing for an exam or if you're preparing for a college. Competitive exam student will always see these two answers and try to be on this side. They'll do everything. They'll burn the proverbial midnight lamp, talk to the mentor, talk to us, come and tell us that ye nahi ho pa raha Rohit, I'm not getting through this. What will it take for me to come from this or an even beginner level answer to that level? Because this is what competition is. This is not just academics. So if you do not have any background in competitive exams, we make sure that you anchor your preparation the right way. No FOMO, but you are always geared in to ensure that your attempts are progressively getting better. Okay. If you're not from tier 1 2 colleges, then you miss certain analytical critical thinking. When you do not have that, then what happens is that you're not able to look beyond the facts. You're not able to get the context properly. You're not even able to basically reframe the question. Okay? You'll see a lot of prelims questions which would be so technical because they'll pick up a technical term from biotech, or they'll pick up a technical term from a particular defense apparatus or equipment or a protocol, and then they'll give you a question on that. Now, if you've not really gone on the fact, and if you get stuck on level 1, then you will end up missing the question. You'll bunk the question. But if you can just plow through, if you can just put through, then you'll be able to you'll be able to deconstruct the option. There was a question on Ind-Arc, which eventually resolved to India Arctic. There was a question on avian metagenetics. And most people might not know meta is equal to community, society. So, if you're not from a technical science background, you might miss on this. But that's fine. Even if you miss on this, the other two keywords, avian and genetics, were enough to eliminate the right answers. Eliminate the wrong options. And that is a skill you have to keep developing, both for pre and for mains. Okay. Anyone lacking core UPSC competencies, and you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with not with the kind of answers that you're able to write right now. Okay. It's not at all about vocabulary. If you're able to understand the theme demand of a question and even write point by point, you're good to start with. Then you come to us and you refine those skills. It is no more and never about rhetorics. Even the essay paper is not about rhetorics. The essay paper is also about finding thesis, antithesis, and then doing a synthesis. That's the task framework which I teach here at CD. But every GS paper is all about theme, demand, understand the directive, break down the demand into the body, wherein you have a DAE approach, which is dimension, argument, example. As close to this as you can do for as many questions as you can do is going to fetch you the highest amount of marks. That's the training. Okay. So this is where we stand. For 2026 students who have taken those last few minutes to self-analyze yourselves, please talk to us. Tell us if you're going on the right way. If not, one mentorship call is all which is needed to understand that how far off you are. And we have a recovery batch launching this October. For 2027 students, you have good amount of time to ensure that you start on the right foot. Okay. First year of yours will go in chasing the depth. We're here, you will chase the depth, you will finish out the big 4 subjects, polity, history, economics, geography. Annotated NCERT is what we'll give you. Core books you will study yourself. We will help you with the mains microtheming. This is something that Civilsdaily has done better than no one. We have no parallel to microtheming. Microtheming basically means hot topics of UPSC backed by RPYQ research. Everything is backed, so you can see why we're talking about this. And those are topics on which we stress inordinate amount of time. Okay. February, aate tak, by the time you would have, covered your optional, you would have revised Big 4 test, and you would have started focusing more on current affairs. On current affairs, we have Samachar Manthan on a weekly level, but I also will be taking burning issue themes with you at a monthly level. So that more or less Samachar Manthan students will have another way to understand the large burning issue of this month and understand the static context. The two questions which I took, agriculture and demographic dividend, are basically nothing else but perennial topics coming from decades and now culminating into a question, which you saw how a ranker and a beginner wrote in two different ways. But at least you need to have those theory. You need to have the basic sensitization to the fact that that is an important topic to cover. Okay. Then comes the part where, prelim comes and abhi tak you're just consolidating your stuff. Second year will then become, for you, 2027 students, will become all about assessments. Everything will be about assessments. Okay. And every assessment will be backed by PYQ microthemes, will be backed by X factor notes, will be backed by this kind of smash architecture, which I just showed you: theme, demand, directive, argument, dimension, argument, and examples. Okay. And that is how you will get better at this. Okay. If this makes sense, pause everything, call us at this number. We're starting a batch both for 26 and 27 students this October, and we'd love to have at least a call with you so as to understand you and us better.